The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com's weekly sale. Head on over to StarCityGames.com/sale because now until November 14th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, you can chuck in a buck for a bunch of stuff. That's right, this is our $1 sale, and we have select Magic the Gathering products and singles on sale for just $1 now through Sunday, November 14th. $1, a ton of things on sale, hundreds and hundreds of cards and other products. $1, I'm going to keep saying it because it's such a small amount of money. There's a ton of cards. It's a huge list to go through, but I promise it'll be worth your time and money because everything is $1 now through November 14th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. StarCityGames.com/sale.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, you know, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more. Before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
The 540 is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. Head over to coalesceapparel.shop and use gift code SCG at checkout to save 10% off your entire order. If you want to rep the coolest Magic the Gathering themed hoodies and t-shirts or stickers, head over to coalesceapparel.shop. Maybe you want to rep our fallen friend Golos with the Tireless Pilgrim versus the Multiverse shirt, or maybe you're Wooburg Forever and you want to go with the South Beach collection. Any way you want to do it. Anti-Mulligan Mulligan Club, we got you. MTG Jam, of course. And all of the Keeping It 100 line, there for you. CoalesceApparel.shop. Use gift code SCG at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Nobody made what they wanted, so they made it themselves. Hello, Cubers. Welcome back to the 540, your favorite Cube podcast that you can listen to on Star City Games and maybe another part of the internet. I am Justin Parnell. You can find me at jparnell1 on Twitter, and my Cube co-host who has been eagerly awaiting all of the brand new toys we're going to get to play with in mere days at this point.
I'm Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. And yeah, I can't wait. I'm actually kind of thinking about pre-releasing this one.
You know, I think I'm going to do one pre-release as well.
Nice.
Because of how Midnight Hunt came out, it was during Gen Con, which I was working at, so I was not able to do that pre-release, but I'm going to try to get this one out.
Yeah, it's been a little while for me, so it's been a little while for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so. So, as you all know, Innistrad Crimson Vow is on the precipice of releasing. At the time that we're recording this, the pre-release weekend is this weekend for us, probably if you're listening this the exact day it comes out, or maybe the day after. The pre-release is directly upon you right now, or maybe perhaps if you're listening a little bit in the future, the set has just come out, and we are able to now go over all of the cards in Crimson Vow. And of course, as we do with all of our set review podcasts, we're going to be splitting this up into 3 sections. Today, white and blue Crimson Vow cards. Next week, black and red. And the following week, green and everything else. So in normal circumstances, we don't always cover the auxiliary cards that come out, things that are coming out in the set boosters only, or maybe the Commander pre-constructed decks. Because of when we're recording this, we did have the opportunity to look at those cards. But I can say for white and blue, which comprises exactly one of the commander decks, there's only one card that we're going to be talking about in depth. The rest are spirit tribal synergy cards or multiplayer centric cards. Ones that don't really fit in, I would say, I don't even want to say traditional, but most cube strategies. If you have a cube that cares about tribal stuff or spirits really heavily, or if you're multiplayer focused, and those are definitely some cards to look at, but otherwise we're just going to be covering the single one.
Yeah. I always recommend people look over those. Yeah, certainly if you are up to spirit tribal stuff, check them out. We'll be highlighting the least hyper-specific card. Actually, there's a pretty sweet one to discuss.
It is a good one. So if maybe this is your first time listening to the 540s set review for any set, we like to break cards up into a couple of different categories. Ryan, what are those two ways that we break the cards up?
Yes, we talk about cards being part of one of two designations, either classic or custom. Classic cards are cards that just kind of make sense in cube broadly. You see them in a booster pack. They tend to stand on their own merits. Just good, well-cost cards. Not really necessarily looking for any help or anything specific to go with them. When it comes to custom cards, they're maybe reliant on some synergies to really see a significant amount of play or to be excited about them. Those are going to be ones that, we talked about the commander decks having some tribal synergies. That's something that does come up in the custom category. Really more synergistic cards you see them in a pack, and you are looking for something else to pair them with.
Now, as we've gone over this a few times doing different sets, just because we have classic and custom designations doesn't mean that is the end all be all of the discussion for these cards. In fact, I would say for both Ryan and I, we include a significant amount of the custom cards that we discuss for each podcast in our various cubes, and especially in the testing portion, at least for me, when I go to try these cards out. So just because something says classic, that doesn't mean that those are the only really good cube cards. There's a lot in each set, and that's kind of how sets are designed now. So just because we say something is custom, that does not mean that it might not fit perfectly into your own cube. I know personally there's a lot of cards that we always say custom that I end up putting in my cube that play great.
Yeah, and I tend to play more of the custom cards than the classics. I do like the specific and unique stuff.
So we have a lot of cards to get to today. So I know we just hit you with a bunch of ads at the beginning of the podcast, which, if you want your money back for what you paid to listen to this podcast, feel free to contact Cedric.Phillips at StarCityGames.com. And he will provide that directly to you. Otherwise, if you listen to this podcast for free, then we have to take a quick break and pay the bills. So we're going to do just that because I know you want to get to these cards as soon as you can. We're going to take a quick break and come back and start with Crimson Vow white cards for cube. Look, we're all Magic players here, so I know you're probably like me, and you have some extra cards that are hanging around that you would love to sell for cash or maybe trade in for some more cards. Well, if you're looking to sell or trade your Magic the Gathering cards, it has literally never been easier. Visit StarCityGames.com/sell with a 30% store credit trade-in bonus and the fastest turnaround time in the industry. There is no reason to sell to anybody else. We have 4 convenient ways to sell your cards to us. 1, check out our buy list. You can find out exactly what we're paying for each of your cards individually right now. That too much work? Number 2, check out our ship and sell program. Put your cards in a box, tape it up, send it to us. We'll do the rest of the work. Or if you're passing through Roanoke, Virginia, come visit Star City Comics and Games, and we can sit down with a buyer and work out a trade right there in the store. Or if you might be a store and you're looking to offload bulk and you have over 500,000 cards you're looking to sell, we can come to you. Any of the ways that you want to work with us, go to StarCityGames.com/sell. That's SELL right now for more information. All right, Ryan. So we have Crimson Vow white cards for cube. And as always, we're going to start with our classic section. And the first card that we're going to talk about is Hopeful Initiate. This is a 1/2 human warlock for a single white mana, so 1 white. And it has the keyword training. This is a new keyword for Innistrad Crimson Vow, and it says, whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And also has the ability pay 2 generic mana and a white, remove 2 +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this means with training, anytime you attack with a creature, at least to start, that is 2 power or greater, is going to get a +1/+1 counter, and so on, as long as you're attacking with something larger than Hopeful Initiate. Now, we have this card designated as classic. I am not quite sold on that. So I'm going to let Ryan sell me on why he feels this card should be included in the classically powerful cubes.
Yeah, the bulk of my argument is this card does really fit into the classic framework for white decks in classic cubes. This tends to be a mono white aggressive shell. There is just going to be a good amount of Savannah Lions-esque creatures, 2 power for 1 mana to pair this with, plenty more 2 power, 2 mana creatures, and you even get into some 2 mana, 3 power creatures, stuff like Adondo Vanguard, that are really going to ramp this card up. And if you do just get that first counter, Hopeful Initiate jumps from a 1/2 to a 2/3. A 2/3 can make a lot of good attacks. That's a really good chunk of toughness there. And if you get all the way to a 3/4, that's a huge return on 1 mana. We're also talking about a framework where the white decks tend to feature some number of Anthem effects, be the Honor of the Pure. You can play some equipment. There's generally some other ways to modify power and toughness. You're not really out starting as the 1/2, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that kind of easily gets you to a higher power creature. I do think the Disenchant ability is something that doesn't come up super often, but also a 1 mana 1/2 that grows not naturally. It does need another creature to help it out, but you should probably be playing more creatures in your Hopeful Initiate deck. It's kind of nice just to have that ability tacked on there, and it will sometimes come up in a very meaningful way.
The thing that I think for me pushes this out of being a kind of a card that sticks in classically powerful cubes is that I feel like this has to be set up in a very specific way for you to grow it. And it sounds pretty simple, right? You have this creature, you have another creature that's bigger, you attack. Well, at the beginning of the game, it's going to take you a couple of turns, at least until turn 3 to attack with this, to actually grow it. And I would say in a lot of cases, you're probably unable to attack with this card on turn 2 if you're playing a 2 or 3 power creature. This is a card, and all of the training cards, but specifically this 1-drop, really, really, really wants you to be on the play. And aggressive decks already want to be on the play. That is going to be the case until the end of time. But this mechanic really, really requires you to do so to take advantage of it. So it's so I feel like in the very beginning of the game, and I think that if you are drawing it later, I feel like it's slightly rough getting going, because you could be in a scenario you would have to make bad attacks to even get this to a reasonable size to actually start attacking with it meaningfully. That being said, I do see the upside of this card. And if you are on the play and if you're able to curve out, this could turn into a 3/4 with minimal effort. And even a 2/3 is pretty good, because 3 toughness is very solid on 2 power creatures that are cheap. So I will give you that. It's not that I think this card is bad. I do not. I actually quite like this card. I think it's going to go very well in my cube, because I both am supporting a counters theme and some modular type creatures in my cube. So I actually think that the bottom ability is going to be definitely more than flavor text there, and pretty relevant a regular amount of the time. So I'm personally excited for it. I just don't think it's going to make it long term in the most powerful cubes.
Yeah, I do ultimately think that it does just come down to how you want to curate it. Personally, the example I'm going to use, because it is just kind of the one that a lot of players play more than any other cube, and it's one that I guess at the time of this recording will be down after 3 weeks on Magic Online, but the Magic Online Vintage Cube, certainly one I've been playing lately. the mono white aggressive deck does just perform probably better than a lot of players would think. Certainly, if you don't play that specific cube and just think about a cube with Moxen and Black Lotus, you don't necessarily want to play a lot of Savannah Alliance, but it does work out pretty well in the context of that specific cube. And I think if you really wanted to push it, which I'm kind of convinced that they're going a little bit in the other direction as Legion's Landing was removed in the last update. So they're scaling back a little bit on 1-drops, but this is definitely one. If they do add this one in and bump the 1-drops back up, I'm having a hard time imagining a mono white aggressive deck in that cube that I would not start Hopeful Initiate in.
Well, especially if you don't have access to Legion's Landing anymore. That card's pretty good.
Yeah, that's actually, I think it's in the top half of the white 1-drops that were in the cube when it was cut. I think that card is very good.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, I'm I really want to be wrong. I really hope that Ryan is right in this case, and this card is just awesome because it's a very cool design. Training, I think, is an interesting mechanic. I think it's a very well designed mechanic for limited in general. So I hope this is the one that translates into cube.
And our next classic white card. This is also one I'm bigger on than Justin is, but it's one that I'm less big on than the previous card. It is Twin Blade Geist. 1 or a white for a 1/1 Spirit Warrior with double strike. It also has Disturb. Disturb was a mechanic first featured in Innistrad Midnight Hunt. Makes return in Crimson Vow. Difference is now we're seeing auras on the disturbed cards on the backside. So you disturb Twin Blade Geist for 2 and a white, and you get an enchant creature called Twin Blade Invocation that gives enchanted creature double strike, and then if it would be put into a graveyard, you exile it instead. So that card, that's horrible. You wouldn't play Twin Blade Invocation. What I like about it is you're not playing Twin Blade Invocation. You're getting it for free when your 1/1 Double Striker dies. And 2-mana 1/1 Double Striker, we've seen this card before. We've seen a couple variants on this card before. This is definitely not the best 2-mana white creature in terms of cube. There's at least 3 or 4 I would put ahead of it. But I do think that you do want a few more 2-drops. I do really like having that aura as upside, getting that double strike aura later on your 3 or 4 power creature as your 2-drop trades off or dies to some kill spell. That's a nice bit of upside to have there. And while it's a card you wouldn't play on its own, that aura just as a free roll on a creature that's kind of close otherwise does put it over for me. And this is another card that I imagine I would start in way more of my mono white aggressive decks than I would not play it.
This, to me, this is a card that in a drafting scenario, I would want this as exactly an aggressive white deck, but that is because of a need for white 2-mana creatures. And you really, like, in those type of decks, you really just want anything. Because curving and playing something on turn 2 that can attack for at least 2 or 3 on the following turn is just important to the function of the strategy. I wouldn't play Fencing Ace in the highest powered cubes. I wouldn't actually play it in a lot of lower powered cubes either. And as you said, obviously, the backside, which is Twin Blade Invocation, I wouldn't play that in pretty much any cube. You know, I'm not playing. What is the card? I think it's from like Morning Tide, which is just this.
Double Battle Mastery.
Battle Mastery. Okay, I'm not going to put Battle Mastery in any cube. That's just never going to happen. Obviously, this card is more than the sum of its parts because it's both of those cards combined into one card. So I get that, but I also wouldn't play a Fencing Ace that when it died drew me a Battle Mastery. I wouldn't play that card. And I don't think this card is good enough for cubes that have rares in them for the most part in general. I think this card is fine in like peasant cubes. I think it's a pretty reasonable price because I definitely would play the card I described there. But in the most powerful cubes, this does not hit the mark for me. I like the concept of Disturb because I think it's a great tool for white to get card advantage. It is aggressive on both sides. but to me, that doesn't add up to a classically powerful cube card.
Yeah, for me it does. for the reason I said, and also something I said about the one draw, something I said about Hopeful Initiate that's also true of this card. The white aggressive decks in the classically powerful cubes, they tend to have some ways to modify the power of a creature. Again, we already weren't playing Fencing Ace, but I do think that it does tend to come up when you tack on some upside that you wouldn't want as its own card. It is surprising how nice it is to get it for free. Free is just a good price.
Free is a good price.
Yeah, and I do think that Twin Blade Geist, if you give it a try, it might surprise you. And again, I would generally play it in my mono white aggressive decks, even in Vintage Cube.
Okay. All right, we'll agree to disagree on that one. One that I feel like we're going to be more on the same page on is our last classic designated card, and that is Welcoming Vampire. This is a 2/3 vampire for 2 and a white. And it has flying. And this is going to be the first but not last time that I say a very particular line of text that I really strongly dislike on cube cards. But on this card, within the context that it's operating in, I think it is acceptable. Welcoming Vampire also has the text, whenever one or more other creatures with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. I hate that line of text. I despise it. I think that most cards that have that line of text are just not good cube cards, because that's a pretty heavily limiting factor for most of the things that have that line of text on them. However, drawing a card is very good. And drawing a card with a body that's probably slightly overcosted for cube, but not by much. A body in cube in white adds up to a card that is definitely cubable. And even though this is only going to trigger once each turn, it is really triggering once a turn. Well, once on your turn in most cases. So because of that, if I look at this as a card that says a 2/3 flyer for 3 mana that draws you a card every turn, which in most cases that's going to be the case, then I think that makes this an absolutely acceptable card, despite the really terrible, egregious line of text that I really hate. But either way, Welcoming Vampire gets a thumbs up for me. Classically powerful, definitely.
Yeah, there's going to be times where it is quite frustrating that you can't get more cards, but then there are some interactions that are really nice. Really like the idea of curving Welcoming Vampire into either Gideon Ally Zendikar or Elspeth Knight Errant and just being totally off to the races there. Plussing to make creature tokens and drawing a card every turn. That's really good.
Yeah. This card is similar to another previous Innistrad card from Shadows of Innistrad, Bygone Bishop, which has the same stats, but it says whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 3 or less, investigate. A couple of differences here. One, you don't have to cast the creature, it just has to enter the battlefield. And two, which is the big one, you draw the card immediately rather than making a clue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not paying any mana for the ability is a really nice touch, especially with the examples of those planeswalkers, being able to spend all your mana and still get that card immediately. That's going to matter, certainly in very high-powered environments.
Yeah, I would say so. So this is a welcome addition to white, 3 drops, a card that I think is a good bridge the gap card between aggressive strategies and mid-range strategies for white. It's nice with token makers, especially like instant speed ones, because if you can trigger this on your opponent's turn, you're really going to be in good shape. Because that's how you get around the once a turn, is you use your opponent's turn as well. So Welcoming Vampire, super cool. This is my favorite white card of the set for Cube.
Well, my favorite's coming up later, but we are going to be looking into the custom cards now, the first of which being Arm the Cathars. 1 white for a sorcery. Until end of turn, target creature gets +3/+3, up to 1 other target creature gets +2/+2, and up to 1 other target creature gets +1/+1. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. So this card's an uncommon. This card would be awesome in Pauper cubes if it were a common. It does still have a place in some peasant cubes or just cubes that are trying to be more about combat. These buffs here, that's a really significant way to push through a combat there, kind of a mini overrun effect.
Yeah, and if you're really, feeling fancy, or you have one creature and you want to give it +6/+6, you can do that because this card doesn't limit you to targeting different creatures.
This has other target, right?
No, it does. Okay, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Can't have white. Why can't have nice things, Justin?
No, sorry, that'd have been green. That'd have been one green, if that was the case. Either way, this also gives vigilance, which is, I think, a great a great bonus on this card, because this lets you push damage without leaving defenses down. And obviously, the way that this is designed, you can really make it so your damage is spread out, so it's difficult to block, because your opponents are not going to have the ability to attack back as much when you cast this. So, like Ryan said, this would be killer at a common, but it would be miserable to play against in Crimson Vow Limited as a common. So no way it could happen.
Yeah. Pretty unreasonable ask, but for cube, you'd like to see it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Next one we have is by invitation only. This is a sorcery for 3 white. It says choose a number between 0 and 13. Each player sacrifices that many creatures. I really, really love this card. This is actually probably one of my favorite 5-mana white sweepers, because in a normal scenario, you just want to clear the board. Great. You can just name the amount of creatures your opponent has. They're all gone. Gets around indestructible creatures. That's a huge plus here. But also, it has this really neat ability that if you happen to have more creatures than your opponent has, you can just make them get rid of all of their creatures, and you can keep the excess. So if they have 3 and you have 5, and they have 3 good creatures and you have 1 good creature and 4 tokens, well, you can just choose 3, get rid of all of their creatures, and keep yours. And the great thing additionally about that is there's no way for them to get to you, because once the spell resolves, that's when you choose the number. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're like, I'll choose 3 and then like I'll cast a Snapcaster Mage and then sacrifice that. That's not going to happen. So this is basically, if you're the caster of this, you're always going to decide and always be able to get all of your opponent's creatures, which is really, really great.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the number being chosen on resolution there. A point that is less relevant, but the thing that I like about this card is that you can choose 0.
Mm-hmm.
Just the idea of somebody actually choosing 0 is very amusing to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
got a little shark typhoon going.
Well, I think this is actually pretty relevant. No. Imagine you're playing against a Goblin Bombardment deck. And you're like,
sure.
By invitation only, and you're like, what are you going to do? If they do nothing, you get rid of all their creatures. Or if they're like, I'll sacrifice these creatures, do you extra damage, you're like, I'll choose 0. Or choose 1.
Pretty sneaky, sis.
Yeah. So
I like that.
Yeah, lots of upside of this card. This is not, so the reason that I really like this card, it's not classically powerful for me because it's 5 mana. Even though it has a lot of upsides to it, it's almost impossible for a 5 mana sweeper to be in the classically powerful, because there's so many 4 mana ones, and 4, it's just when it comes to sweepers, it's just more important than 5. The mana cost is the key thing, and this just has 5 as that number. That's honestly really what it comes down to, because otherwise I think this card is great.
Yeah, same. Our next card is Cemetery Protector, 2 white for a 3/4 human soldier with flash. When Cemetery Protector enters the battlefield, exile a card from a graveyard. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, if it shares a card type with the exiled card, create a 1/1 white human creature token. So pretty decently sized flash body here. It could be a nice surprise blocker or surprise threat. And you have sort of a Emeria Angel-esque effect where you can set up to make those human creature tokens on landfall Also, just that graveyard hate that comes up sometimes. 4 is a lot to spend on graveyard hate, but
it
there's
does have
flashback
flash.
spells. Yeah, flash. You can, if they're targeting something, trying to reanimate a creature, or maybe a Snapcaster Mage is trying to get up to something. That this card can shut that sort of thing down. It's a pretty crowded space. We talk about four mana white cards. Really tough to break into that for the classic designation, but I do think this is a really solid custom card.
I think this card is more clever than it is good, but it is clever. A lot of little portions going on. You get flash, you get an acceptable body for 4 mana, a little bit of graveyard hate, a little bit of token generation. It doesn't do anything well, but it does a lot of things okay. So, despite this being a mythic rare, it does not read like a mythic rare to me, but I digress.
It's part of a mythic rare cycle.
It is part of a mythic rare cycle. Yeah. Where other cards in the cycle are better, I might argue all of them.
We'll get to those.
We'll get to those. But for a lower powered cube environment, I actually think this card is fine because it's not oppressive in any way, and it provides a lot of utility. So, yeah, custom is perfect designation for this one.
Yep, I'm into it.
Okay, the next one, Drog Skull Infantry. This is a very simple card. This is a 2/2 for 1 and a white, just straight away. It's a Spirit Soldier, so I guess that sometimes matters. The 2/2 Spirit Soldier for 1 and a white. No abilities on it when it's on the battlefield, but it does have Disturb for 3 and a white. When you cast out of your graveyard for its Disturb cost, it becomes Drog Skull Armaments. It's an enchant creature, as all of the Disturb cards in this set are enchantments. This is an enchantment aura enchant creature, and of course has the ability when Drog Skull Armaments put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. An enchanted creature gets +2/+2. Now this is a common, and I think exactly in Pauper Cubes, which is all commons, this is actually a great card. Provides a 2-drop on the front side, provides a boost +2/+2 on the backside. It's really important to be able to have a large creature to break through combat, and especially in white, where you can sometimes get into a situation where you have a larger amount of small creatures and sometimes can be slim on the beef. Putting this on a medium-sized creature to make it bigger, or a flyer, is actually a pretty huge deal. So I actually think this is a slam dunk Pauper card.
Yep, if I still maintain my Pauper Cube, this one would definitely be going in.
Yeah, sweet one.
Next, here's my favorite white card in the set. Possibly my favorite white card of all time.
Okay.
Not a high bar, but still.
Yeah.
It is Faithbound Judge, 1 white for a 4/4 Spirit Soldier with Defender, Flying, and Vigilance. The beginning of your upkeep, if Faithbound Judge has 2 or fewer judgment counters on it, you put a judgment counter on it. And then as long as it has 3 or more judgment counters, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So it basically becomes a Sarah Angel at that point, 4/4 Flying Vigilance. And then it has Disturb for 5 white. And it is an aura on the backside, but it's an enchant player, a curse called Sinner's Judgment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a judgment counter on Sinner's Judgment. Then, if there are 3 or more judgment counters on it, enchanted player loses the game. And then if Sinner's Judgment would put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile instead. I really like this card. You have this 3 mana creature that's going to be really good at deterring attackers, maybe blocking for your planeswalkers. It's a little tough to answer as a 4/4. That body's not messing around. Enough time passes, it starts getting aggressive on its own. And then if they do kill it, then you have this card that says, all right, well, you have 3 turns to win the game. I love it.
Yeah. This is a card that if in normal circumstances, if someone were to ask me how I felt about this card, I'd be like, I don't have a clue. I'm a test it my cube for sure, but I have no idea. However, but since I'm speaking into a microphone on a cube podcast, I guess I'll give it a shot. I really love the design of this card because it's like kind of nonsensical, but it's clearly powerful, right? It's still providing a 4/4 for 3. Heavy Plume Veil vibes here. For those of you who remember Plume Veil, which is a for triple blue-white hybrid is a 4/4 flash flying defender. Still easy to get got by Plumeveil. Okay, so people that are looking up this card for the first time, like, I've never seen this in Cube. Let me tell you, this was a staple at one point. It earned its stripes. It's kind of been edged out by more powerful cards, but if anyone still has Plumeveil in your Cube, you get mad props still. But Faithbound Judge, as Ryan said, this turns into a Sarah Angel, and it actually is able to attack on the same turn the Sarah Angel can attack if you play this on curve. The thing I like least about this card is that this is a white card that hates other aggressive white cards. Because you were talking about how so many white cards have 3 power. Well, there's not a lot of white cards that have 4 power. So this is kind of a nightmare to get past. That being said, this can go in a million different decks. Because, like, I don't even think this is bad in, like, in a white aggressive deck, honestly. It's probably not great because it can't attack until turn 6, but if they have to use a removal spell on it before it attacks, then that's a win. And if they don't, it's a Sarah Angel that you paid 3 mana for on curve.
I think it's, like, probably tough to start it in a high-powered cube.
Yeah.
However, if you end up, if we're talking about, say, a Magic Online cube with League play, and you play a mono white mirror, I like that 4/4 body for 3 mana.
Yeah, big time. This is also really great against removal.deck, because if their plan is to just, like, run you out of cards and, like, kill all your creatures and draw cards, if you can stick the aura on them, then they have to kill you in 3 turns, they lose, which is pretty dope.
Yeah, we had a mailbag question about cards with alternate win conditions. This is the one. This is the one that you should play.
Yes. That is the answer. You're right on, Ryan. Yep. Yeah. This is a super sweet one. I'm absolutely going to be trying this. I have no idea how it's going to do, but we will report back at some point. All right. Next one. Fierce Retribution. This is an instant for 1 and a white. Now, this has a keyword on it that we've not gotten to yet. So I'm going to start pre-keyworded. And Fierce Retribution for 1 and a white says destroy target attacking creature. Now, this has Cleave. And Cleave says you may cast this spell for its Cleave cost if you do remove the words in the square brackets. The Cleave cost is 5 and a white, and the bracketed word in this text is attacking. So you can either destroy target attacking creature for 1 and a white, or destroy target creature for 5 and a white. I despise how this looks. It's just atrocious in my eyeballs to look at this card. Play-wise, I'm sure it's great. And for a common, I don't believe there are any cards for 2 mana that destroy an attacking creature. And like as a common. I could be wrong, but I think they're all damage-based, so this just gets everything. And at 6 mana, you can get everything.
Or they sacrifice one that they choose.
Yeah.
And they're double white.
Yeah, horrible. We have pips. Yuck. Not what you want. This card's sweet, though. Just gets the attacking creature. And later, if you happen to have 6 mana laying around and you instep, it's like, all right, well, I'll just kill anything. Turns into a martyr. That's pretty sweet. I still hate how it looks, but play-wise, I'm in. I'm in for it.
Yeah, this card, it's pretty nice for like a pauper cube. Cleave is a mechanic that it's what you would do if you wanted to do kicker, but hated your player base.
Yes. Which, I feel like that's somewhat appropriate here.
We deserve it.
Yeah.
Yeah, give it to us now and again.
Yeah, it's a mechanic that if you were new on the design team at Wizards and you submitted that, they would tell you that they thank you for coming to the meeting. We're going to continue on without you. So obviously this is one that was submitted by someone that is more tenured, because it looks horrible. Because this is the thing that starts with all right, hear me out. And I don't want any feedback until I finish explaining the entire thing.
What does this card do? Well, you just got to think about it in terms of the words that are in square brackets.
Exactly. Jesus, It sounds horrible for you to say.
Okay, well, here's a card that's kind of nice to talk about. Fleeting Spirit, 1 and a white, a 3/1 spirit. You can pay 1 mana and exile 3 cards from your graveyard to give it first strike until end of turn. Or you can discard a card and exile Fleeting Spirit, and you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So I do like Blade of the Sixth Pride with upside, 2 mana, 3/1. This is not the best 2 mana, 3/1 in white, but these abilities are nice. You have some insulation against sweeper effects, some protection against removal effects. This card is just a little tough to get into combat. Generally going to trade with things. You're not going to have 3 cards in your graveyard to exile, certainly on turn 2 and 3. That's a pretty big ask, and you won't be able to do it too many times. So that's why this card's not getting the classic distinction, but I do think it's a solid custom card and one that I do intend to cube with.
Yeah, and I think this is a great card for peasant cubes that can have uncommons or slightly lower power level cubes. This card I think is just going to be great. It's just when you get to the higher power level, there's like this line that's like directly through the middle of Seasoned Hallowed Blade. Like that's like a medium acceptable card, and this is like below that, not quite as good as that or Danto Vanguard. So I think it's going to work for a lot of cubes, and any sort of 3 power creature for 2 mana that is difficult to kill is going to see a significant amount of play. Now, this does a very bad job at also killing other things before not being killed because it has to remove itself from combat. But at some point, that first strike line stops being flavor text, and you actually have to threaten that. And a 3 power first striking creature is something that can be difficult to interact with, as first strike is kind of a very annoying mechanic on creatures just to have in general, both aggressively and defensively.
Yeah, so, and there will be some games where the threat of activating that ability is the important part.
Exactly.
Yeah, if your opponent has like a bunch of 1/1s, then sure, cards in graveyard become a resource that you will run out of. But if they're hanging out with good creatures, they're not lining up to block if you might get first strike.
Yeah, you're like, look, I don't give a shit. I'll remove these 3 cards.
Yeah, I got them.
Try me. Yeah.
Yeah. You blocking?
Yeah, exactly. And that's good. These are, it plays bad against tokens, but if they're playing like magic cards, if their cards have a magic back on them, it's pretty good.
Right.
So yeah, it lines up nicely. Not going to be in the most powerful cubes, but it's going to be in a lot of them. Okay, so next up we have another double face card. This is Catilda Dawnheart Martyr. Apparently Catilda dies. Spoiler alert.
Oh no.
So for those of you that put Catilda in your cube after the last set, have bad news. Anyway, Catilda is a star legendary creature spirit warlock for 1 white. There's more words. Flying, lifelink, protection from vampires. Catilda Dawnheart Martyr's power and toughness equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments. Now, at the top of the show, I had said that there's a lot of really deep tribal synergies for spirits and multiplayer stuff. This is a spirits/enchantments payoff card, but it's actually a pretty reasonable one. So the reason this is custom is obviously this is not going to make it in most cubes. But I actually think this is probably one of the better cards if you're doing anything in the realm of either enchantments or spirits. Because not only is it a star where it can actually be a 2/2 or a 3/3. A 3/3 for 3 with flying and lifelink is actually pretty solid if it gets to that point. And of course, it's always going to be a 1/1 because it is itself a spirit. On the back, its disturb cost is 3 white, and then it becomes Catilda's Rising Dawn. It's a legendary enchantment or enchant creature. And of course, it gives enchanted creature flying, lifelink, and protection from vampires. And it gets +X, where X is the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments. And of course, this is an enchantment with the disturb rider of when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. A lot of upside on this card if you're playing with those type of strategies. If you're not, you can safely ignore it. But this is definitely one that I think if you are working with spirit tribal or enchantment stuff, this is one I would probably pursue as a nice payoff card for those strategies.
Mm-hmm. And again, that disturb card, that back half, you would not play that card, but the fact that there's a creature on the front side, if that creature is appealing, even though you wouldn't put that aura in your deck, it just shows up later after your creature dies. So it's a nice little upside there.
Yep.
All right, our next card is Lantern Flare. This is another cleave card. So for 1 and a white, you have an instant. Lantern Flare deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life. X is the number of creatures you control. I will say that this is probably my favorite cleave design because the bracketed text is all at the very end.
Yep.
You don't lop off anything in the middle. It's just take that last sentence. So if you pay the cleave cost, so now it's a Boros card. It cleaves for X red white. It deals X damage to a creature or planeswalker. You gain X life. So you just pay X mana. You don't count your creatures anymore. So if you're in a position where you and or your opponent have a lot of creatures, this is a pretty solid removal spell. You probably are going to at least be splashing the red side of it, though. It does only target creature and planeswalkers. Maybe you get a little excited and you think, oh, cleave, it's an alternate cost. Maybe if I do something, I can target a player. Nope, not the case.
You sure can.
No, not a chance. Don't even think about it. But it's a decent enough removal spell.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Yeah, do you know the card Harsh Sustenance?
I know that there's the card's name. I can't think of the card.
It's from Feyre Forged. It's 1 white black, and it's an instant with this text. Deals X damage equal to target. I think it's just target creature, or it's actually target creature or player, and X is the number of creatures you control. Well, that card's never really been good in Q, but I've always wanted it to be, and it was good in Limited. This costs 2, and it's only 1 color. So even if you're like have 2 creatures, and this does like deals 2 to something and gains you 2 life, it's probably pretty reasonable. But you really have to have this like cleave side for this to be playable. The reason I like it is because it's instant. Normally cards like this are sorceries. They're way worse as sorceries. This is much better as like a end of turn kill your creature or combat trick. So I'm interested in that. This probably isn't going to make it to my cube, but I feel like this type of card is always attractive to people. And this is probably one of the better versions that we've got. So give it a shot.
Yeah, I'm like intrigued by it, but I'm not excited by it.
That's how I feel.
I'm fine with it. I would be happy to see it in a pack.
Yeah, I'd give it a shot. The price is right. All right, next up we have Panicked Bystander. This is a 2/2 human peasant for 1 and a white. It says whenever Panicked Bystander or another creature you control dies, you gain 1 life. Then at the beginning of your end step, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, transform Panicked Bystander. And on the back, it is Cackling Culprit. Cackling Culprit is a 3/5 black human rogue that says whenever Cackling Culprit or another creature you control dies, you gain 1 life. Same as the front side. And it also pays 1 and a black. Cackling Culprit gains Death Touch until end of turn. A 2/2 turning into a 3/5 at the flip trigger of if you gain 3 life is actually pretty solid. Imagine if you have life gain in your cube, this just turning into a 3/5, like at 3 life is probably pretty good. It only costs 2 mana on the front side, and you don't really have to put any more resources into it than that. So definitely intriguing for that. And every once in a while you get more and more little life linky, life matters stuff. So this is always one to keep in the back of your mind for those type of strategies.
Yeah, definitely. The bump to the 3/5, that is the whole thing. Creatures dying to gain life is like kind of awkward.
Yeah.
But 3/5 is a good return for a 2 mana creature.
Yeah, it's pretty big. 5 toughness is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Makes it a good attacker.
Oh yeah. Probably does a decent job at blocking more than that.
Yeah, probably so.
Our next card is Resistance Squad, 2 and a white for a 3/2 human soldier. When Resistance Squad enters the battlefield, if you control another human, draw a card. So pretty obviously something for a human tribal kind of theme. There are a lot of humans. Many of them are white. I definitely have spent a good amount of time messing around with human tribal and cube. One thing I will say is there's actually a lot of 3-mana white humans. It's like a pretty highly populated space. This card's an uncommon, so maybe you can put this in a rarity restricted cube. I have not worked with human tribal in the peasant environment. I couldn't necessarily speak to that, but that is a spot where if you are reliably turning it on with cards you want to play otherwise, that's actually a really good uncommon.
Yes, very much so. And that's kind of where I'm looking at this as well. Whenever we get another Innistrad set, there's always additional, you get more human tribal stuff here than pretty much anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So we're creeping into the territory where you can actually do this reliably in like a peasant cube environment. And this is a slam dunk there.
Oh yeah.
Three power for 3-mana draw card. I mean, that's gonna be great in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, 3-mana 3/2 that draws a card is pretty close to a card that they banned in standard a few years back. This is no rogue refiner. But, I mean, the similarities are there.
If you're mono white, you take what you can get.
Uh-huh.
All right. The next one, this is a very interesting card. Savior of Olenbach. This is a 1/2 human soldier for 1 white. It has training. So whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And it says whenever Savior of Olenbach trains, exile up to 1 other target creature from the battlefield or creature card from a graveyard. And when Savior of Olenbach leaves the battlefield, put the exiled cards onto the battlefield under their owner's control. So that means if you train, you can like banish or priest something of your opponents, or you can future reanimate one of your creatures from the graveyard. The power level is here, but the speed is very slow. And it's also pretty easy to disrupt this before it kind of gets going, because it's a 3-mana 2/1. So I would imagine in slower cubes where you really want to give the ability for your players to like do their thing and play out their stuff, this is probably a pretty cool card there, and maybe not much else because it's a mythic rare.
Yep. Yeah, definitely for an environment you're trying to slow things down. You want some cool things to happen, but you want some investment. A 1/2 creature that really has to get into combat to do anything meaningful. And also, this is like, if you're trying to interact with this creature, if your opponent just kills all your stuff with more power, 3-mana 1/2 is very embarrassing. So some real risk there. So you kind of have to be excited by the fact that the card's a little dicey to want to include it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's appropriate statement.
All right, and then our last white card with the custom designation is Voice of the Blessed. White for a 2/2 spirit cleric. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Voice of the Blessed, so you're a Johnny's Pridemate effect there. And as long as Voice of the Blessed has 4 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has flying and vigilance. As long as Voice of the Blessed has 10 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has indestructible. So kind of a few different things going on with this card, a lot packed in there. You know, there's several lines of text, but it still feels like they put a lot in there with a design that is fairly elegant otherwise. You care about life gain, you are a spirit, you are a cleric, you care about +1/+1 counters. If you're doing any one of these themes, there's a reason to put this card in your cube. Kind of weak if you're specifically on spirits, but if you're on clerics, you're probably doing life gain in some capacity. The thing that I don't like about the card is white.
Yeah,
not about those pips. But if you're into life gain stuff, this is a card that I could definitely get behind.
Yeah. Upside is clear. Also, if you're doing life gain, you want as many Johnny Pridemates that you can get, right? And this is, if you can cast it, I mean, on a mono white deck, this is just better than a Johnny's Pridemate. you once you get to 4, this has flying and vigilance. That makes it a 6/6 at minimum flying vigilant creature, which is just, that's pretty powerful. And those are the exact type of things that you want for your little +1/+1 counter life gain deck. So yeah, this is a card you'll know if you want.
Yes.
It's not going to be for every cube because you're not going to have that life gain strategy in every cube, but the cubes that have it, you're going to want this card. Pretty simple, and it's going to be pretty awesome when it shows up.
Definitely.
That is officially our last white card. We've got to the end of white, so we are going to take a quick break to pay the bills. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Innistrad Crimson Vow, blue cards for cube.
What's up, gamers? Taking a break from the pod to talk to you about Star City Games Premium and why, if you're not already a member, you really should become one. First of all, the price is great. Only $7.99 a month. That's less than the price of one collector booster. And for that, you get all the following. You get a 5% discount on all Magic the Gathering sealed product, including the aforementioned collector booster, a 10% discount on all Magic the Gathering singles, if that's more your speed, and as well as a 15% discount on all supplies. It's going to be your deck boxes, your binders, your sleeves. Lord knows I always need more sleeves for cubes and all the Magic cards I have lying around. And you also get free entry into some SCG Tour online events. Definitely check those out. And finally, last but certainly not least, you get exclusive access to Star City Games website content from a stable of some of the game's greatest and most entertaining minds. You know who we are. You know where to find us. Sign up for SCG Premium today at starcitygames.com/join-premium.
All right, we are back with Innistrad Crimson Vow, blue cards for cube. And just like with white, we are going to start with our classically powerful cards. And for our first one, we actually have a flip card or double face card, however you really want to state it. This is Jacob Hawken, Inspector. This is a 0/2 legendary creature human advisor. 1 and a blue to get him going. And his only ability is tap Jacob, and you can draw a card, then exile a card from your hand face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. Then you may pay 4 blue. If you do, transform Jacob Hawken Inspector. Now, before I get to the back, this is all one ability. So you have to draw the card, exile it, and then pay 4 blue. You can't do that external of activating this ability.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important note. And on the back is Hawken's Insight. This is a legendary enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. Once during each of your turns, so one time, you may play a land or cast a spell from among the cards exiled with this permanent without paying their mana cost. So that's either with Jacob Hawken Inspector or with the legendary enchantment Hawken's Insight on the back. The obvious analog to this card is Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Now, I think Jace Vryn's Prodigy is significantly better than this card, but that still leaves a lot of room between this and a lot of other looters. I do like looters, and I think this is probably one of the better ones because the obvious upside towards the end of the game, if you draw this later, is pretty exceptional. The downside is one of the biggest benefits of Jace Vryn's Prodigy and other looters is both drawing cards and putting cards in your graveyard. Jacob Hawken Inspector does not do that part. You really have to be going for that later portion to get this into a card you're interested in doing. The power level, the upper limits of this power level is very good because then you end up with essentially a 6 mana slightly altered omniscience. Because again, you're going to have the ability to choose the things that you're discarding and exiling. So presumably it's going to be things that are more expensive. But it's a little bit dangerous because you really have to get there. And if this creature dies and you bring it back, those cards are just going to be gone forever. So I'm kind of medium on this card, but I definitely see the power level being there and the upside being high. I just think the floor might be a little too low for me.
Yeah, so initially, when I read this card, I thought, oh, it's a real bummer that you exile the cards, you don't put them to your graveyard. There's a lot of stuff going on with the graveyard, certainly in high-powered cube. Delve, Reanimator, kind of the big one. Where you think, yeah, I'd really like to fuel my graveyard. But then as I thought about it more, you are kind of building up to this effect. If your looter is surviving, you're getting that card selection. Whether you're putting stuff in your graveyard or not, you're still filtering your draws. That's quite powerful. Your opponent can kill this creature in response to the paying 6, but you're under no obligation to pay the 6, and you're kind of improving your draws all the time. So that's kind of a rocky thing for them to try to set up. And if you don't end up paying, you can just keep kind of pulling ahead as you improve the quality of your draws. And then ultimately, the point that made me more bullish on this card is that, assuming that your opponent plays what I consider to be correctly and kills this if they can, if you get to just keep activating it, if you get to transform this card, immediately you get paid off by casting a spell on that turn. And then you have this engine that can kind of keep going from there. So while this does not set you up to, for example, reanimate a Gristlebrand, even in a Reanimator deck, you can use it to kind of try to set up to find your other cards that could. Or if you do get to 6 mana, you get to discount it that way. I'm pretty big on Arcane Artisan, which is a little bit different. You know, you get to go right away, your first look at that, but then Arcane Artisan also does add some vulnerability to the creatures that it cheats in by tying their fate to it if it dies, and also being a 3 mana creature to get going and actually paying mana to loot. So I like that card. This card's a bit cheaper, and the more I think about it, the bigger on this card I am.
I like this card more than Arcane Artisan. I think there's a pretty massive difference between 2 and 3 mana, and the fact that it costs you no mana to do this ability. Now, obviously, you're getting significantly more for your money with Arcane Artisan, but this is going to have application for virtually any deck that's not trying to attack your opponent to death in the first handful of turns of the game. So this is a card I am going to try, but I think that it is likely that the potential is not realized often enough for this to be a mainstay in cubes. I like it a lot. I really hope that I'm wrong. This is actually one of the cards that I'm most excited about playing with, but I really just hope that it ends up being as good as it can be. Yeah. Honestly, I think the thing that comes down to it for me, I hate exiling my own cards. I really, really hate it.
That's why I spend so much time thinking about this card, because that's just totally a bias that I have. And the conclusions that I've drawn, I guess they're more hypotheses, but the hypotheses I've come to, I believe that the 6 mana ability is probably going to come up more often than most players would think at a glance. It looks like a pipe dream, but it's actually pretty realistic.
I'll include myself into that category. I don't think it's going to come up that often.
So I think that's probably going to come up more often than people think. And I also think that I guess 2 things, the fail case where your opponent kills it, whatever, you would be playing a different looter.
It's going to die. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The fail case where you just filter your draws, I think despite exiling the cards, that's probably better than it reads.
Yeah, it's still better to draw and get rid of stuff you don't want than having the opportunity to interact with them later. I would agree with that, but I use my graveyard frequently. Just in general, like that is the kind of Magic I often like to play. So exiling my own stuff gives me pause. That's the big thing.
And that's fair.
If this said, if this card dies, put all the cards you exiled into your graveyard, I would slam dunk. This is maybe the best card in the set for Q.
Yeah, it would be really difficult to argue against the card if that were the case.
Yes. So that's a big difference for me. Either way, I'm going to try this card. This is going to be one of the first cards that I make a little paper proxy of, and hopefully can cube with this weekend to go to shot. So yeah, I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right, and I hope this card is just awesome.
Same. All right. Our next classic card for blue is Overcharged Amalgam. 2 blue for a 3/3 zombie horror with flash and flying. It has exploit. Brought that mechanic back, originally featured in Fate Reforged.
I think is it Fate Reforged or Dragons of Tarkir?
It's definitely I'm pretty sure it's in Fate Reforged. Maybe it is Dragons. I don't know. That block in it, Tarkir block.
Yeah.
When this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. When Overcharged Amalgam exploits a creature, counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. The way I think about this card is there's just a ton of different modes and executions where you do a small thing or a big thing. There's the mode where you exploit a different creature. There's the mode where you exploit itself, and there's a mode where you exploit nothing. So there's a lot going on with this card. 3/3 flash flyer for 4 in blue is actually a pretty solid body that can be a surprise blocker. Blue, a color doesn't really get removal. That's useful. If you have to exploit itself, that's 4 mana for a disallow, which is more than you would normally pay for the card, but you're paying for the modality there. And if you exploit something else, you have this flash flying body kind of upgrading, and you have the counter spell attached. I think that's really where the card's going to shine. The reason why the card might be held back is that blue decks don't tend to play a lot of creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the classically powerful cube, that's going to be the issue. I do think on 4 mana, the card that is just a 3/3 sometimes that doesn't do the counterspell thing does give me enough incentive to want to put this card even in my very, very powerful cube decks. I think that the modality between the counterspell and the 3/3 flash flyer comes up in a big way in enough games that I am pretty interested in this card even for high-powered cubes.
Okay. Ryan, are you familiar with the card Silumgar Sorcerer?
Yeah, it's the 3 mana 2/1.
Mm-hmm.
Let's exploit counterspell.
Yep.
Yeah,
flying and flash.
The reason, I thought about that card when I was evaluating this card, and the thing about a 3/3 is it sometimes actually eats things in combat.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried Silumgar Sorcerer for way longer than I should have. And I was constantly disappointed by that card. One, I think exploit is actually a pretty poor cube mechanic just overall. The black cards are better because they at least want to do that thing. The blue cards very rarely do. That's something I found very commonly with Silumgar Sorcerer. Whenever I exploited it, it felt like I was kind of forcing it. Like I was giving up enough to where it didn't feel like I was advancing. And whenever I had to exploit itself and sacrifice itself, it felt bad. The differences between Silumgar Sorcerer and Overcharged Amalgam are not enough for me to change my experience and how I felt about that card. A 3/3 flyer for 4 is significantly better than a 2/1 for 3. They both have flash. But it's not enough for me to feel like this is a classically powerful card. I don't think that the play patterns are going to be different enough for this card to play significantly better than the card that preceded it that it's kind of based on. So I'm fairly out on this. I really don't like exploit on blue cards because it's you often have to give up something meaningful rather than like a token, which is what you pretty much always want to be exploiting, because in blue it's pretty rare you're going to have things that you want to actively sacrifice, like non-token creatures. This is because I tried Silumgar Sorcerer for a long time, ultimately never liked it. I cubed that card for like 6 months and didn't like it from like the first week, and still just like believed that it was going to be good, and it just never was. I'll probably make the same mistake with this one, but I'm not a believer in overcharged amalgam like at all.
My expectation is also that I am bigger on this card than most players. And when that happens, sometimes I am wrong. That's certainly the case. Been wrong plenty of times. I do think that you do get presented with quite a lot of powerful interactions. None of them are going to be in mono blue decks. Certainly when we're talking about classically powerful cubes, but just going into a second color, you start to line up a lot of really good ways to set up exploit. I'm really big on blue-red non-combo decks. Imagining playing with this card in my Young Pyromancer or my Goblin Rabblemaster deck. That does seem quite good to me. And then the red decks also can take a little bit more advantage of the 3/3 flash threat there. So I kind of expect this card to overperform the average player's expectation, but I do stand to be wrong.
Okay. All right, we'll see. We will see. I feel like this one, much like the previous, the cons block exploit creatures, if these are good, it will be fairly obvious that they are. So, all right, I get the luck of the draw to talk about what I think is the slam dunk blue card for Cube in Crimson Vow, which is Thirst for Discovery. This is an instant for 2 and a blue. It simply says draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a basic land card. Thirst for Knowledge is a great card. Compulsive Research is a great card. That's a sorcery. You have to discard a basic land to avoid discarding 2 cards, but draw 3, discard 1 or more at instant speed is a proven Cube staple, and this is also going to be a Cube staple. It's a very easy card to evaluate. We have winners that look like this in the past, and I would say on average this is a little bit better than Compulsive Research, because even though you have to discard a basic land, upgrade to an instant from a sorcery is pretty massive, so this is an easy one for me.
Yeah, this is just a slam dunk. I can't tell you how many times I've discarded 2 basic lands to thirst for knowledge in games that I won. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, and it doesn't matter because it's still great.
Yeah. So making this have card advantage more often at instant speed. They've been definitely more willing to print better versions of this card, or at least more versions of this card in recent years. We saw the one that discards enchantments in Theros Beyond Death, but
that's the one I'm forgetting. I can't remember the name of that
Thirst
card.
for Meaning, I want to say.
Thirst for Meaning, that's the one. That's
great. And basic lands, just like I would love to have 15 non-basic lands in every cube deck. It doesn't happen. And also if you want basic lands in your cube deck, it's the one thing you can always have.
Yeah.
And, in the course of the game, you'll draw one that's extra pretty often. So really easy to actually convert this one into the card advantage spell.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you just get up 3 cards. Yeah, it's just a great card. This is a super easy one. This is, I would say, pretty easily, this is going to be the most cubed card in the entire set.
It's tough to argue with that.
Yeah.
So that's 3 classic cards for white and blue as we move on to the custom section. The first custom blue card is Cemetery Illuminator, part of that mythic rare cycle we started. 1 blue for a 2/3 flying spirit. Whenever Cemetery Illuminator enters the battlefield or attacks, exile a card from a graveyard. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and once each turn, you may cast a spell from the top of your library if it shares a card type with a card exiled with Cemetery Illuminator. So I guess this is kind of the blue Courser of Kruphix, which is cool. It, over time, turns into basically Future Sight, which is busted.
Yeah. It's especially busted on a 2/3 creature for 3.
With evasion, yeah.
Yeah. I had to, so as I was going through today, when I read the white card, I got disappointed, which has nothing to do with this, but I got disappointed because the white one, only Cemetery Protector only exiles upon entering the battlefield, not attacking for some reason, because white, I guess. this has no such restriction. When you attack, you also get to exile a thing, which is obviously significantly better. And 2, you start spreading out and actually getting more things that you can cast. So the reason I think this card is very good, this is what I'm going to try. The only reason this isn't classic for me is it still takes some getting going, and sometimes it's just a 2-3 for 3 that misses a lot on the top card.
And I have to make a kind of not a correction, but definitely a wording that isn't quite right. This card is not like Courser of Kruphix, so you cast the spells, you don't get to play lands. That's really what's going to bump it down. That was a big part in our analysis of Augur of Autumn. Yes, during our Midnight Hunt review episode. Being able to play the lands is way more important, clearing the dead cards from the top of your library. It's still nice to play spells, certainly attached to a 3-mana 2/3 flyer. Blue just has a lot of really busted stuff, so the competition is really rough. It is.
This is a solid card. This is probably going to make it do a lot of cubes.
Yes.
Also, I think I talked about it last week, but even still, I've cubed more with Augur of Autumn over the last weekend. That's turning into like the standout card for Midnight Hunt for me for cube. That's so just incredible. Yeah, it's awesome. I thought it was great, and I think I still undersold it. Next up, for blue, we have a card that is arguably significantly worse than Augur of Autumn, than most things are. That is Dream Shackle Geist. Dream Shackle Geist is a 3/1 flying spirit for 1 blue that says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1. Tap target creature, or target creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This is a very aggressive blue creature. If you are interested in very aggressive blue creatures, you will probably find this pretty appealing. It removes blockers, or it prevents crackbacks from continuing to happen because you can keep things from untapping. It's very easy to kill. It's a 3/1. It's got low toughness. This is a narrow card for cubes only because blue is often not interested in this type of card unless it has flash. If this card had flash, I would feel very differently about it, because then we're talking in the Vendilion click type territory of flexibility. It doesn't.
Yeah, this card would be absurd with flash.
It would. I still think it's very solid, and this is another one I'm like putting down in the back of my mind when blue can get slightly more aggressive, because this card will get significantly better when the things that it's trying to do are backed up by the rest of the color that it's in.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what this is, though, Justin? This is the long-awaited upgrade to Latch Seeker.
Oh my God, it is. It is. Finally. Yeah, I like Dream Shackle Geist.
Yeah, definitely. That effect. As long as the games are about creatures on both sides, it's going to be an impactful body.
Yep, for sure.
Our next card is Hullbreaker Horror. 5 blue for a 7/8 Kraken Horror with flash. The spell can't be countered.
Don't try.
Don't even think about it. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Woof. That's an Andrew Brown card if I've ever seen one.
Oh man, this thing's just a beast. I've really liked having non-legendary reanimation targets, so the like unmarked grave gets better. This is a hell of a reanimation target, and also a straight up win condition because it has flash and it can't be countered. So you can just be playing your reanimation deck and you're like, shit, I'm at 5 lands. I'll just wait in the end step or during combat. I'm just going to slam this down. Nothing bad's going to happen. I'm going to untap and proceed to easily win the game from there.
Yeah.
The only reason this is not a classic card for me is because it's still a 7-mana creature that doesn't draw you 7 cards. but
Yeah.
outside of that, this is a pretty ridiculous card.
If you have a 540 card vintage or legacy cube, yeah, this card, it's easy to justify putting it in there.
Yeah.
And a card of a similar texture that was black, I think I would easily actually put in the classic section.
Mhm.
It being a blue card, competition is stiffer, doesn't necessarily fit as well into a mono blue deck, and people play too many win conditions in their blue decks anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this card is really powerful.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful. This is definitely going into my cube. And I do have a 540 card legacy power level cube that I'm going to slam this into, and it's probably going to be great. Ryan's exact reasons nailed on the head of why this doesn't quite make it into classic. But otherwise, yeah, this is going to be a monster.
I was going to say this card's not going anywhere near any of my cubes, but this one actually might fit into the Is It Tubert. I've been looking for more stuff that beats people up for trying to play too many counter spells.
This beats the shit out of them.
Yes.
Because they hold it up, they can't counter it, and then they can't cast any spells for the rest of the game.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a monster. All right. Next up, we have Inspired Idea. Love getting all these cleave cards. Inspired Idea is a sorcery for 2 and a blue. And it says, draw 3 cards. But however, there's a big old bracket of text that says, your maximum hand size is reduced by 3 for the rest of the game. And its cleave cost is 3 blue. So if you play 3 blue, you have played Sorcery Speed Jace's Ingenuity. Jace's Ingenuity is a card that I've cast many times in many different formats, but I always cast it as an instant unless I'm about to lose the game.
I've done it on my turn sometimes.
Yeah,
Gotta
were you
make
about
a
to
land
lose
drop.
the game?
Well, I was about to miss my 6th land drop, Justin.
Okay, your 6th land drop? You had to have something to play on like turn 7 to do that.
Yeah, it's in my Jace's Ingenuity deck.
Yeah, Hullbreaker Horror. You got to play that on turn 7, so you're going to cast. Yeah, I get it.
You don't want to miss it.
Yeah. Drawing 3 cards for 3 mana is nice, but you better be damn sure you're not going to need those 3 extra cards to have your hand size above 4 for the rest of the game, because that is a hell of a drawback.
Yeah, that's a rough pull.
3 cards for 3 mana though.
Yeah, this is likely going to go into really wonky combo style cubes. The card I think about is Ideas Unbound. This card's really evocative of that, except sometimes you just cast it for 5 and like that's the mode that allows you to keep playing the game.
Yeah. You're like, well, I was going to cast this for 3, but as it turned out, I got to 5 lands before, so I'll go ahead and cast this now.
Yep. Yeah, pretty specific application. Like, I guess you can put it in your cube just because you have Storm and Reanimator, but it's going to be on the sidelines a lot of the time.
Yeah. I'm definitely, when we had this on this list, I'm definitely thinking combo-oriented cubes, for sure.
Oh, yeah, big time.
There, it's actually pretty sweet, because you're just like, 3 for 3? Shit, I'm in.
Yep.
I don't need whatever. I don't need these other cards.
Yeah, rest of
I'm
the
gonna
game.
lose either
You
way.
mean the next 2 minutes while I'm taking all the game actions?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm in for that there. Otherwise, I'm probably out. But honestly, I know myself, and this is a card that if I was in blue and I saw this in a pack, I wouldn't just pass on it. I would like stop and think about it for a second. And I think because of that, it's probably worth it to making it some cubes just to have people think about it.
Yep. All right, our next card's a little bit more honest in its applications. This is Lantern Bearer. 1 blue for a 1/1 flying spirit with Disturb.
This might be the most honest card that we actually talk about for the entire set.
Disturbs for 2 and a blue and gives enchanted creature on the backside +1/+1 and flying on an aura called Lantern's Lift. And if Lantern's Lift would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. An archetype that I have grown very fond of working on some custom cubes myself is Dimir Ninjas.
Okay.
That shit really does it for me. forcing blue to be more about creatures, having some evasive threats that if you have to be defensive, you make blocks that at best trade. Really cool tension in those games. But you also still have the ability to really pull ahead if you can execute your game plan. Cards that are flying men with upside tend to fit really well into the blue column in these kind of strategies, those kinds of cubes. And then the fact that this also just later can be an aura that you put on your ninja, for example, and give your ninja evasion. That's really nice. This card really fits really well into that kind of environment.
Yeah, I would actually go as far as to say that this is the second best flying men ever after Spectral Sailor.
I think that the one that I would probably value more highly than you is Siren Storm Tamer. I think that card is actually quite excellent, but this one's definitely up there.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I really just like having, I mean, 1/1 flying is perfectly reasonable in a lot of environments. This card is a slam dunk in Pauper Cubes. This card's awesome in Pauper Cubes.
Mm-hmm.
You get a flying man, which is like, sometimes there's Suntail Hawks and the like running around anyway. But the fact that the cards you draw via Disturb is a give target creature +1/+1 and flying for 3 mana. Well, that's how those games end. You have a bigger flying creature.
Mm-hmm.
And even in Peasant Cubes, one of my favorite things is to just play like blue-green and just find ways to give my green creatures flying. This drawing this on the backside is pretty sweet. It's got to be a lower power environment or a rare restricted environment, but I think in those, this card is going to shine pretty bright. So I'm a big fan of old Lantern Bearer here, despite his simple upbringing.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
All right, the next we have another double face card, Mirror Hall Mimic. This is a 0/0 spirit for 3 and a blue, which of course it's not. It's a mimic, so we know it's going to be doing some shenanigans. You may have Mirror Hall Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except as a spirit in addition to other types. Well, these cards are always like, fine, this is just clone on the front side. It is a rare, I'll note, not an uncommon, unfortunately. So you cannot have it in Peasant Cubes in most cases, but of course also has Disturb for 3 blue and turns into Ghastly Mimicry. It's an enchantment aura for enchant creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. This is a pretty powerful effect. It does cost 5 mana, and it obviously is an enchant creature that doesn't affect the battlefield immediately until the beginning of your next turn. But if you are doing slower cubes or something that is multiplayer centric, or maybe removal light cubes, this is probably a pretty sweet card because you basically you get Clone on the front side and then Progenitor Mimic on the back side. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really nice upside. And the place that I really like this card, I put a good clip of clones in any cube I'm working on with tribal themes. Blue cards, the absolute staples for me are like Phantasmal Image, Phyrexian Metamorph, Glasspool Mimic. And this card really nicely rounds out that list. Just another way to copy your creatures with tribal synergies, and then the Disturb upside. That's a card that demands an answer right away.
Yeah.
Like, if Ghastly Mimicry is just going, you're just pulling ahead for no additional mana for the rest of the game.
Yeah, if you make it to your upkeep one time, you're even.
Yes.
And anything beyond that, you're starting to get some pretty overwhelming advantage. Because you're probably not going to put on anything small or anything non-meaningful.
I would try not to.
Yeah.
All right, speaking of small and potentially not meaningful, our next card is Mischievous Catgeist. 1 and a blue for a 1/1 cat spirit. Whenever Mischievous Catgeist deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Disturb for 2 and a blue for an aura called Cat-like Curiosity. Love the flavor of this card.
Yeah.
The aura says enchanted creature has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And if Cat-like Curiosity be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So it is a 2-mana Ophidian, which is, as far as Ophidian goes, that's pretty cheap.
It is. It's pretty cheap.
I have been big on this aura upside. I would not play 3-mana Curiosity in my deck. However, I am sympathetic to 2-mana Ophidian, and then just having that upside on it, that's pretty inviting.
Now, I will note that look, Wizards has got it figured out. Because they're like, all right, it's a spirit. That means it's a geist. And they're like, you better put cat on the name so people know it's a cat also. All right, well, how do we do that? Well, just put cat geist. Just put it on there, okay? So this is going to be the most popular card in the set. Just make it cat geist, okay?
This actually just really works because geist is the German word for ghost. And Innistrad, it pulls a lot from German culture. And a big thing in the German language is just to put more syllables on the word. Just make it a bigger word. The German artifact creature, have you ever seen a German artifact creature card? It's just artifact creature, just smushed together. It's one word. So Catgeist is that's a big German inspiration there.
Wait. So in German, the creature type is also going to be Catgeist.
I don't know about that because that's 2 unique parts of game text.
Well, they better. Yeah, this is a cheap little Ophidian. And it's putting, I put this card on the list because mainly I want to talk about the fact that it said cat guy. So I don't really have anything notable to add beyond what Ryan said.
It's kind of like cat dog, except the other half is the ghost.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Necro Duality. This one is going to be fairly straightforward. This is an enchantment for 3 and a blue. And it says whenever a non-token zombie enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Are you playing with heavy tribal synergies that include zombies? If yes, this card is busted off the hinges. If not, you don't have this card in your cube, and there's not really a middle ground.
Yep, that tracks.
Yep. Pretty simple. The effect is insane, which is why it's a mythic rare, but it's obviously very specific to zombies. So either playing zombies or you're not, and it's either awesome or it's not. The reason I like this card is this is the perfect type of card to like first pick in a multiplayer or tribal type cube and just try to go all in around it.
Yep, not much more to say there. And the next card on the list is our commander card. I don't have it in front of me. Do you have it ready?
Yes, I do. I do have it ready. So yeah, I'll take this one and we'll just alternate again. Occult Epiphany. This is an instant for X and blue. And it just says draw X cards, then discard X cards. Make a 1/1 spirit, blue spirit token creature for each card type among cards you discarded this way. So if you cast this for 3, you draw 3, discard 3. And depending on the different card types that you discarded, you make that many spirits. So if you discard 2 lands and a sorcery, you make 2 spirits. And you still get the card draw and discard. So the fact this is an instant makes it very interesting because you can potentially make 3 or 4 spirits during an end step and do a huge filter of your hand all at the same time. Or in combat, probably more likely when you're getting attacked. I also like that you can do this for like 2. So on turn 2, do this like X equals 1. On turn 2, you can draw, discard, make a spirit, like discard something that you want to reanimate or get out of your graveyard. And it just scales really well. I think this is a very cool card. It's probably more cool than it is good, but it is very cool. And it's cool enough that I'm definitely going to try it and see what the upper limit of its power level are.
Yeah, it's super cool. And especially if you're supporting, you mentioned Reanimator as a theme, but something like Delirium is a pretty obvious home for this card. It's very similar to a card from Onslaught called Read the Ruins.
Yes.
Which is blue X, draw X cards, discard that many cards, or sacrifice permanent. Like you do a combination of discarding cards and sacrificing permanents to catch up to how many you drew.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's card disadvantage because you are down the Read the Ruins. And this one, you are down the cards you cast, but then you get these 1/1 spirits, which if you discard one card type, you break even. But then the ceiling, you can make a bunch of spirits. And then it's like contextual. You can either choose to go for more spirits or just clean up your hand in the best way, but you always get at least one spirit. So it's not ever fully card disadvantage. It's a really nice card.
Yeah. It's actually pretty difficult to not come out ahead when you add the creatures in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because if you're doing it for like 2 or 3, it's pretty easy to make sure you get the maximum amount of spirits.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a sweet one. I'm really excited to try this one because honestly, I think this is a pretty difficult card to evaluate without playing with it. So those are the cards I'm always the most excited to give a shot.
That card is going to be busted in Spooky Cube. I can
I'm
tell
sure.
you right now.
Yeah. It's all of the thing that Spooky Cube wants to do, right?
Yes. It enables madness, delirium. It's instant, like that matters.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
All right. Our next card, back to cards from Crimson Vow. We have Scattered Thoughts, 3 and a blue for an instant. It's a common that's going to be relevant.
Very much.
Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of those cards into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. So definitely not pushing the limits on the power for card draw spells ever printed. However, at common, that's a really nice one.
Ooh, so nice. I don't think that you don't generally get cards like this at common, like it's like Tamio's Epiphany and Foresee. This is an instant. And you get to bin stuff.
Yeah,
which is generally more powerful than scrying. So.
And the graveyard every time. So you like to harp on activate only once a turn. The thing that I hate is reading the line of text on the bottom of your library in a random order.
Sure. Yeah, this doesn't care about that. It's like, no, check them all out. Get the ones you want. The rest go in the bin for later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just a great card. I mean, this is a super duper slam dunk for Pauper Cubes. Easy inclusion for Pauper Cubes. And I would say probably a pretty reasonable card for Peasant Cubes as well.
Yep.
Okay. We have one more double-faced card, and that is Soul Cipher Board. This is a really interesting card with a million lines of text on it. So it's only fair because I think Ryan got most of the other ones. It's an artifact for 1 and a blue. Soul Cipher Board enters the battlefield with 3 omen counters on it. You can pay 1 and a blue, tap it, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your graveyard. Whenever a creature card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, remove an omen counter from Soul Cipher Board. Then it has no omen counters on it, transform it. I would like to stop here and note that I thought that you drew a card with that second ability. And now that I'm reading it, this card is terrible, and I don't even want to know what's on the back.
Yeah, I'm cool with just moving on. This card was definitely not on my list. I figured you had some defense of it, and imagining that it actually is good is a solid reason to like it.
Yeah, I thought in the second ability you drew one, and you bend the other one, and I was like, that seems pretty sweet. I was like, that's just like Jam Day Tome that turns into a 3/2 later. In fact, it is nothing of the sort.
I can't believe they would print that. Oh,
I mean, they could, we're in the post Throne of Eldraine world. Like anything's possible. Yeah,
That's
this card's
true.
terrible. Don't put it in your cube.
Yeah, forget about that one. Not. All right, then we'll go on to Storm Chaser Drake. It has considerably less text. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Drake with flying. Whenever a Storm Chaser Drake becomes the target of a spell you control, draw a card. I mean, Welcome Turn isn't like the worst card ever printed. So this card is that can block. And I'm sure sometimes you want to put like a Rancor or a Curious Obsession. Maybe you got a little Dive Down going on in your cube. I put Dive Down in cubes sometimes.
Yeah.
This card is just like a good evasive body that has some upside.
Yeah, there's a no downside 2/1 flyer for 2. That's a good start. And if you're a cube that like deals with any of that, I really like this card. Right, we talked somewhat. We've talked before about like combat oriented cubes. This is an exceptional blue card for that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's like, as soon as I saw this, 1, it has incredible art, just like S tier art. 2, in a combat cube, like blue, I feel like kind of lags behind in the like creature department to actually like play proactive threats. And this is a really, really good one because every time you play a trick, you get to replace it. And that's pretty sweet.
For sure.
Yep. Okay. Wash Away is next. This is another cleave card. It's an instant for a single blue, and it says counter target spell. And then the bracketed text says that wasn't cast from its owner's hand. So and the cleave is 1 blue, of course, regular cancel mana. So if you play the cleave, it's just cancel. If not, you counter target spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand. So I actually like this more in like higher powered cubes, even though it costs 3, because I think that's when you are casting this more often for a single blue, and I think that's kind of sweet. I don't know if it will make it because having just a cancel as like the downside effect is probably not quite enough to make it into those cubes, but I feel like it's worth a shot. I feel like it's worth a shot if you're playing a cube where if you're countering a spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand comes up frequently enough that this card's probably really great in those cubes.
Yeah, it's just really easy to include it if cancels in bounds too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because casting this for 1 is like a huge blowout.
Oh yeah.
Because you were probably countering something pretty reasonable.
Probably something that costs more than 1 mana.
Probably something that costs more than 1 mana, I would imagine. Yeah. So that's super sweet there, but pretty limited in its application. You really got to know when you want it.
Speaking of limited in application, our next card is Whispering Wizard. 3 and a blue for a 3/2 human wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. And Justin's favorite line of text, this ability triggers only once each turn.
God damn it. Why is it on this card? Like, we have Murmuring Mystic that's a 2/5. It's already better than this. Like, a 2/5 is already better than a 3/2. Or
it's
excuse me,
it's a 1/5.
A 1/5.
It is still better.
A 1/5 is better than a 3/2. Like, we have to say once a turn because it's like, oh, non-creature spell. Well, we didn't say instant or sorcery. What do you just have a million artifacts? So what? Just so be it. Who cares? Just make the spirits. I don't even have anything to add. I'm really just frustrated that this line of text is specifically on this card. This is only the second one we've talked about today, but like, this is more egregious because there's a dozen other cards that do this, and they don't have that text.
It also is just the 4 mana 3/2, like making the body so vulnerable. That's clearly turning the knob. Like, I want to make a card that's worse than Murmuring Mystic. And so like they establish the body and are like, okay, but I want to be really sure that it's worse.
Yeah. I want everything to kill it. Like, come on. I don't even think that if you're a lower powered cube, because this is an uncommon, if this was a common, this would be defensible.
Yeah. Maybe quite good at common.
Yeah, it would be quite good at common. This would be it would be good. It would definitely be defensible, but at uncommon, all of the other cards that do this for the most part are like, with the exception of like Sedgemoor Witch, Poppet Stitcher, and Monastery Mentor, they're all uncommons. And this is better. This is worse than all of those. All the other options are better. I would say leave this at home unless you have a 1,600 card cube. Anyway. Speaking of cubes that not a lot of people have, the last card is a very specific cube, but I feel like it's necessary for me to talk about it. Wretched Throng. It's a 2/1 zombie horror for 1 and a blue. When Wretched Throng dies, you may search your library for a card named Wretched Throng, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. If your name is Robert Brinker and you have a cube based on a conversation from this podcast, that has 6 to 7 of each card in the cube, this is a slam dunk for you.
I'm so happy that cube exists. I think about that one sometimes.
It's really great. And you know what? Blue lags behind a little bit because some of their stuff, they don't have aggressive creatures. This is a 2/1. Every time it dies, it gets another one. It's great. Congratulations, Robert. You got another one. That is my last blue card. I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, that pretty well wraps it up. Yeah, there's like a pretty reasonably deep well in Crimson Vow. I think that the set's a little bit weaker on balance than Midnight Hunt was.
Yeah.
But it still does deliver a pretty good clip of cards.
I'm actually pretty happy about that, to be honest. I would actually rather get a set of this power level for cube. I actually think the set's reasonably powerful for 60 card constructed, but for cube, I would rather get these sets more frequently than not, just because there's a lot of really interesting cards that are kind of specific rather than generically powerful, and I think that often leads to more interesting cube design. So I'm all for it. I think Crimson Vow is going to be sweet for cubes in a way that's not overbearing.
Definitely, yeah, some really specific stuff, and then also not being overwhelmingly powerful means that you don't have to get a bunch of cards. It'd be pretty exhausting if every set was Modern Horizons.
It would be exhausting. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. Just remembering doing that set review where we talked about 80% of the cards in the set.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah. Once a year is good enough. I'm sure there'll be something next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's when the Lord of the Rings set. That's going to be the one.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Well, as a reminder, next week we are going to be talking about Black and Red Crimson Vow Cube cards coming straight to you. In the meantime, you can subscribe to the 540 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Stitcher, YouTube, your local podcast app, and anywhere you are listening to this podcast right now. Leave us a review where you can, even if it's just a little 5-star review or less if you're feeling, like you didn't agree with all of the sentiment that we said, and that's fine. Maybe you really liked Soul Cipher board and I poo-pooed all over it, didn't even read the whole card. That's fine. I can respect that. If you want to get in contact with me, you can find me on Twitter at jparnell1. I can also be found on the Think Twice podcast by searching Think Twice MTG. Anywhere you can listen to this one. And of course, Commanderverse is on StarCityGames.com and YouTube. Ryan, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Overdrive. You can also find my articles weekly on StarCityGames.com. Last week, I had said that my top 10 article, if everything went to plan, was going to be up last week. It didn't, but it should be up this week. So you can already check that one out. And then go to the website every week. Go to StarCityGames.com to see what I'm talking about in the world of Cube, be it a Magic Online Cube Spotlight, a top 10 list from the newest set as they come out, when they come out, or just maybe some Tubert content, some stuff about my own projects. There's a lot going on with Cube, and I'd appreciate y'all reading.
I love it. All right. We will be back next week and the week after that with more Crimson Vow. But until then, thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.